So it's really nice to have gotten a response from I am Adam Hudson. What's going on, Adam? I appreciate that Adam has joined the conversation because he represents another voice trying to integrate science and religion rather than to, in a reactionary sort of way, adopt one or the other of these extremes. Either, let's say, fundamentalist Christianity, um, sort of dogmatic Christianity of the sort that Venom Fang X represents very well, or adopting the opposite extreme of a sort of uh, materialistic atheism, which derives its authority from some mythologized notion of science, as the only valid way of knowing, and not only the only valid way of knowing, but as a sort of project, a civilizational project, right? That is supposed to bring us towards the promised land or into the promised land through technological mastery over nature, be it external nature or internal human nature. And as Adam was describing so well, the scientific secular project is really just another um, expression of that same Christian millenarial drive to achieve the vanquishing of evil upon the earth. Um, Science has a sort of Christian root, and without the psychological container that was provided by a monotheistic faith that evacuated soul and intelligence from nature in order to locate it in a transcendent, all powerful God. The notion of science, a knowledge of a mechanized external world, never could have occurred to us, right? So, monotheism was the necessary precondition, evolutionarily speaking, for the kind of scientific worldview that we take for granted as being somehow autonomously created by modernity. The most pervasive myth of our current secular age is that we are an age without myth, right? It's the myth of mythlessness. It's the myth of um, complete autonomy, uh, of rational autonomy, the myth that an individual or that a whole society could jettison tradition and discover the truth through um, like immediate experience and experiment, to discover it empirically for oneself in the here and now. And certainly the scientific revolution was another important mutation in the evolution of Western consciousness. But it's time for another mutation. This scientific secular world picture has become just as obsolete as the religious world picture which preceded it. How do we know that? Well, science has been guiding us. This sort of scientific mythos has been guiding us for several hundred years, and running in correspondence to it and supported by it has been the industrial revolution and the industrial growth society, and these technologies that the scientific worldview has allowed us to bring forth and encouraged uh, to be brought forth have destroyed, decimated um, the biosphere, the web of life on this planet, and life all around us is withering at a rate not seen for 65 million years. We're entering the sixth great mass extinction. It's caused by the industrial mode of life. the human beings have devised. And so that industrial mode and the um, scientific uh, worldview that sustains it and that justifies it are obsolete. What we need is some new integration of the ancient and the modern, of the religious and the scientific, right? That's always the argument that I'm going to be trying to make. But for the modern or the postmodern person who maybe even recognizes that the scientific sort of objectivist picture of a mechanical nature known by an autonomous rational mind, that for someone that acknowledges the lack of adequacy in that system, religion can still seem obsolete. There could still be this sense of nihilism, of the evacuation of meaning from the universe, and that there's really no going back to that more immature and childish religious vision of the world. So the question is, how does one come to see religion as relevant again? Um, I really look to thinkers like Alfred North Whitehead for clues for how we could move in this direction towards reimagining religion such that it becomes relevant to us again in our post-modern, post-enlightenment context. And I wanted to just read a page here, a few paragraphs here from Isabel Stenger's book, Thinking with Whitehead, A Free and Wild Creation of Concepts. So she writes, well, first she quotes Whitehead from Science in the Modern World, who says, "The power of God is the worship he inspires." And then Stengers continues, "The term worship is one of those that francophones can envy the English language, for it unites when French fragments through such words as cult, adoration, and veneration. For Whitehead, worship first signifies surrender to the claim for assimilation, a claim whose motive force," he writes, "is mutual love." So the power of God is the power to inspire love in the worshiper. The crucial point, continues Stengers, is that this definition operates in immanence. That which demands assimilation has no distinct identity. Of course, Whitehead speaks of a force, but this force, which he calls mutual love, is not the force of God's love, a God who might demand our surrender. This love belongs to the very experience of worship, and the effect called surrender is not explained by a cause, but characterized by a style. To evoke God's power does not imply, in Whitehead, the preliminary affirmation of his existence. For both the God of a religion and the worship that is framed by this religion derive, for Whitehead, from a fundamental experience of humanity. That experience being religious vision, a vision of which no religion can be the privileged expression, although each one develops and collapses from epoch to epoch, according to whether its doctrine, its rites, its commands, or its definitions do or do not evoke this vision, revive it, or inhibit it, giving it or failing to give it an adequate expression. Whitehead continues, "Religion is the reaction of human nature to its search for God. The presentation of God under the aspect of power awakens every modern instinct of critical reaction. This is fatal, for religion collapses unless its main positions command immediacy of assent. In this respect, the old phraseology is at variance with the psychology of modern civilizations. Stengers continues. The modern critical spirit could indeed be called religious, since it, like what it denounces, is a reaction to a proposition dealing with God. The problem is that its axis, to believe or not to believe in God, testifies in its way to the weakening of modern thought and gives rather inadequate expression to the religious search to which it owes its passion. The question, does God really exist, is crucial only if God is conceived as demanding and forbidding. That is, if the statements that include him claim to benefit from the authority to which the term really always alludes. Whether this authority refers to political power, to reason, or to the truth of a revelation. In other words, Whitehead is an agnostic in the sense that the question, does God really exist, has, for him, no valid answer outside of a religious practice. Yet his agnosticism does not communicate with a simple anthropology of the religious feeling, whose author would contemplate as if from nowhere, submitting to a neutral, objective, and in short scientific gaze, a human feature from which he himself would be rather mysteriously free. His agnosticism is positively constructivist, that is, also pragmatic. For the way religion is described commits the person who describes it, implies a wager on what can make a religion hold, on what the religious feeling might indeed be capable of. For Whitehead, the wager does seem to bear today upon a religion's ability to accept and affirm that the power of God it invokes can indeed be understood as the way this religion defines the kind of power it claims. God is the name for the efficacy upon human beings of the religious vision that they nourish, cultivate, and constitute as an ingredient of their life. So Stengers here is trying to suggest that this old question that the atheist and the theist argue about, namely, does God exist, is irrelevant because God, Whitehead's bringing forth the participatory vision here, where God is nothing more than the experience that creatures have of love and compassion, of the beautiful, of the moral, the good, that, God dwells within and among us. And when we bring forth religions based on this experience, this religious vision, as Whitehead is calling it, um, we're actually we're not creating God in that sort of in a like ex nihilo way, like creating God from nothing or from our mere psychological willpower. Um, what we're doing is being in the world and participating in the cosmos in such a way that the possibility of God, of divinity, is actualized and sustained through our human will and agency, and community, or will towards community, you could almost say. Um, and it's almost as though you could express it this way: that for Whitehead, the divine is no longer all powerful, um, in the sense that, when Plato asks in the Euthyphro if the good is only good because the gods will it, um, rather, Whitehead's God, and I think Plato's God too, is limited by the good. God isn't all powerful because the omnibenevolent aspect of God limits God's power. And for Whitehead, God is more of an imminent lure towards the beautiful, towards the loving and compassionate, towards the good. And to the extent that we are able to imperfectly strive to the realization and the incarnation of these ideals, God becomes real. So it's not so much a metaphysical question, does God exist? That's not what's relevant as far as the religious vision that humanity has, been trying um, to experience for its entire history. what's relevant is not the metaphysics, but the really the practice, the ethic here. To the to the extent that we um, act in such a way that divinity seems manifest, then divinity is real. But this theoretical question, does or does not God exist, it's not relevant. So religion has to step out of this debate with science as if the question were merely theoretical. The question is so much more than that. It's about how we live, right? Uh, so I guess I'll leave it at that. Um, Please, Adam, let me know how that sits with you, and you know, let's get some other voices in here. Let's see what we can think together. Thanks for listening.